Hey everyone, it's Lisa with Are You My Cousin? It's Thursday, and we have Mary Eberle from DNA Hunters with us today to answer all our burning DNA questions. Hey Mary, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing well. I want to thank you so much for joining us again. I'm learning so much about DNA having you on with me once a month.
That's great.
So yeah, let us know when you're coming in that you know where you're from. It's always fun to kind of see where people are from. It lets us know too that you guys are seeing us and hearing us well. So that does let us know. Looks like we have a Texas contingent in the room. We have Diane and Suzanne. Hey, Joyce from Mississippi. We have Suzanne from Texas. Doug from Ontario. Nice to see you there. So yeah, we're super excited to have you guys all here. See, Suzanne, you said you have a super long question, too long for the box and submission page. All right, hang on to it, and we'll try and get to it toward the end. Hey, Alicia. Hey, Stephanie from the Guernsey Channel. I'm so excited that you guys are here. We have Mary. We have really gone international today.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. Hey, Diane from Ohio. Yes. So excited to have you guys here with us today. So we have a lot of questions. So today, if you happen to have read the email, you know that today is a DNA Q&A for Mary to come and just kind of answer those DNA questions that you might have. So what we did is I did ask for the questions to be pre-submitted because it just kind of helps us in our planning. So we've got those. And then if you have one, we're going to do the pre-submitted questions first. And then as time allows, we will take questions from the audience. And I guess if we get too many, Mary, maybe we just do a round two another day.
Sure.
Kind of things. So really excited that you guys are here. Hey, Louise from Edinburgh, Scotland. Fingers crossed, I'm getting to the UK to do my family history in 2023, Louise. So, all right, wonderful. Glad we're here. So, Mary, anything you want to say before I pull up what we've got?
No, I'm ready to go.
Ready to roll. Okay, so guys, I put the questions on the slide. And so the first question is from Charlene. She says she has matches on her husband's paternal line who have documented trees, as does I for him. But they are all descended from the grand and great grands with a different last names. Oh my. His closest match is 876 centimeters. First cousin now deceased. Then he jumps down to his second and third cousins. No relatives of theirs bear my husband's surname. His father is one of 13 children, and their lines have their match with an ancestor with 8 siblings. That's a big family. What are your thoughts on that, Mary?
Right. Well, the first thing I noticed was that 876 centimorgan, that first cousin match.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the shared centimorgan project tool, and I can share that with the viewers.
Okay, let me take the question down and pull the other up. There you go. Great. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger first. Hang on one second, guys. Let me make this bigger for you guys. Okay, that should do it.
Okay, and let me go over. So this is the shared centimorgan or CM project tool, and it's from DNApainter.com. And one thing I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that there is this beta version. Can you see my pointer on the left side? I clicked on that, and then in this box, I'm going to enter 876 for how many centimorgans are shared. And when I go down, it says there's a 99% chance that is a first cousin. There's basically a 1% chance that it might be something else, but that's good to know. It's always really important to think about how many centimorgans are shared and what are the possible relationships. So I am going to, let's see, come back here and
sorry.
that's fine.
Wrong button, guys. sorry.
we have a slightly different setup today, so that's what's going on. But okay, so the first thought was, okay, well, I think this is really a first cousin, and because of that 99% chance that it is a first cousin, and that means that the grandparents are correct. Because if it were, let's say, a half first cousin, where you're only sharing one of the grandparents, then you're going to be sharing about half that amount of DNA. So on average, 450 centimorgans. So from this, I would say the grandmother and the grandfather are correct. And I was wondering, and I'm not sure if the question asker is online, but if you are, I was wondering, is this the husband's direct paternal line?
I can answer that for you. Actually, so
Oh,
she
okay.
actually was not able to be online with us today. She had actually submitted this and said she would catch the replay. So, unfortunately, I don't have the answer for that. We won't know that yet.
Okay. And of course, on a first cousin level, it's either going to be paternal or maternal. So it's got to be the paternal. But then when she goes on to talk about the second and the third cousins, that's where a second cousin could be on the father's line, meaning the direct paternal line, or it could be on the father's mother's line. And I was wondering who the most recent common ancestor is for those second and third cousin matches. It's the question. I'm not exactly sure what what the concern is. It's normal, or it's nice to have first cousin matches, because then it's on my mom's side or my dad's side. And then it's really nice to have second and third cousin matches, and those are much more typical just because we have more of those distant cousins. And because, for example, a second cousin, you're going to share just one set of great grandparents. And so you're narrowing down your common ancestors. And of course, if it's on the direct paternal line, meaning the father's line, then, and you've got a second cousin, then you would expect that surname to be coming up. And if it didn't, then you might start to wonder if maybe the great grandfather is misidentified as being the biological great grandfather when in fact they aren't. So if the person wants to follow up with comments in the comment section or reach out to me directly, I'd be happy to say some more about this, but I wasn't quite sure. I think the big concern is that no relatives of theirs bear my husband's surname. So
Okay.
again, this could be that the great grandfather on that direct paternal line is not biologically correct. And it's great to have multiple siblings because, like you're saying, you're just potentially going to have more cousins out there who might have tested.
Got you. I'm going to pull that down. Okay. We have another question. Just a minute. I was answering. I know a couple folks or somebody was having trouble saying the screen was a little fuzzy to read. It looked clear on my end. It's possible there's perhaps on your end there, Karen, there could have been a the strength of the internet or stability there. So we'll try the next one and see. Let us know if it gets better for you on that. All right. So we have another question. And so, let me get to the next one. Okay, so Ken had a question. He said, please discuss DNA triangulation. Is it possible to determine or narrow down the possible relationships with a DNA cousin by looking at common cousins with whom I have defined ancestral linkages? Can you recommend further reading?
Okay. So this is interesting. DNA triangulation is where you and 2 other matches all share the same segment. So, A and B share that segment, B and C share that segment, and C and A share that segment. And what that means is that you have a common ancestor, and the 3 of you can work together, or you can look at those other 2 matches trees to try to find the common ancestor. That's not always the case where you've got related matches. You've got cousins, and you might share one DNA segment with some of them and other DNA segments with other cousins who are also from that same line. The DNA gets recombined at every generation, and the fact that you have a triangulated segment or you don't doesn't mean that you're not related. And then the person asked about these common matches, and I would call that, so he or she called them common cousins. And I think that brings up a really important point, which is when you've got known matches, and then you use, on Ancestry, it's called shared matches, to see who matches you plus this one person you've selected, this known match. That should help you figure out who your unknown matches are. And for example, on Ancestry, if you start color coding, you might have one color, for the most recent common ancestor of your known match. So let's say it's a second cousin, which set of great-grandparents you share, and you make that the red dot, and you label it with the name of those great-grandparents. Once you've done that, and you look at those shared matches of that second cousin, you can apply that red dot to all of those, and now you're tagging those other matches as coming from somewhere along that line. They might be your third cousin or your fourth cousin, so they're further back in time. Or it might be, a first cousin who also shares those common great-grandparents, but they're closer in time to you. So, this is a really useful feature, and each company calls it something different. So at Family Tree DNA, they call it in common with. And at 23andMe, they call it relatives in common. And MyHeritage calls it something like that too. But, it's just it's a really important way to study your matches and to try to figure out who these people are, right? Of those unknown people who pop up, and, they might even have their full name, and you're thinking, I have no idea who this person is, right? And
well, that happens a lot to me, actually.
Even if you start out with that person that you're thinking, who is this? And you look at their shared matches, that should help you figure out how you're related to that person, and get you started on that path of figuring out who they are.
Sounds good.
And they also asked for a book. And one that I would recommend is Diane Southard's book. She published about 2 years ago, and it is called Your DNA Guide, the book. So that is an excellent one. Jane Bettinger had one a few years before that. So that's out there too. And then there's just a lot on YouTube, like these, when Lisa, you and I talk, a lot of times we'll do like a mini PowerPoint and on a specific topic. And there's really a lot of information out there. And of course now, there are more and more in-person meetings, as well as some, still some Zoom meetings.
I was just typing. I'm typing those into the chat, guys. What was Blaine's book's name?
I don't remember.
All right, I'll find it. Well, I'll look for it, guys, while she works on the next question. Okay, so this is a longer one from Valerie. Valerie says, I recently became aware of hereditary trait a hereditary trait that has been passed on to me from my great-grandmother, Nora. I documented this trait through 7 of my photographs. One particular photo of my great-grandmother's mother, Hawa, has this trait, as well as her youngest son, Maroon, and her oldest son, Yusuf, on their hands. How can this trait, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, is it clinodactyly, descend from Hawa, her mother, to all 5 of the children, including Nora, then skip 2 entire generations to me? I have clinodactyl on my hands, which means bent little finger, and also on my feet. Only 1 toe on each foot lies flat. Who could it have passed through Hawa's father or her mother? Where does this gene become dominant?
Excuse me. Okay, well, this is a really interesting question. My husband and his mother have this trait, and I never knew the name of it. So thank you very much, Valerie, for educating me on the name of it. I looked this up, and it is an autosomal dominant trait. That means that if a parent has it, each child has a 50% chance of inheriting it. Well, then the next question is, well, then how come it like kind of disappeared for a couple of generations? Because if it's autosomal dominant, it needs to be passed down in order to show up in a later generation. The answer to that question is that there is what's called incomplete penetrance of this gene. And what that means is that fewer than 100% of the people who have the gene actually have the trait. So you can have the gene going through, like in your case, 2 generations where it doesn't look like they have the trait because their fingers and their toes, are straight. And then all of a sudden a child is born subsequent to that, and now poof, the trait shows up. So that's really interesting. My husband and I didn't have kids, but I guess that means that if we had children, then they would each have a 50% chance of inheriting this. But that, then keeping in mind that there's that incomplete penetrance, they might not exhibit the trait. Okay. But that's why, normally, stuff is autosomal dominant or recessive or passed from mother to son on the X chromosome. And I think that's what his mom said to me when she grabbed his hand and she showed me her hand and she said, Michael and I have this trait. And anyway, so it's not one of those X-linked diseases where it goes from mother to son and the mother doesn't have it. It's just that it's autosomal dominant with incomplete penetrance.
Interesting. I had no idea, because I was when she shared that question, I was like, I don't know. That's an interesting thought, and I didn't know the name of that. I've heard of other hand things, but so she was able to. I thought she probably, because I love photographs, and she said she had seen it in 7 other people in the family. Have you seen it? Obviously, your husband's mother. Have you seen it through other family members?
I haven't. I
don't go around asking to see their feet either.
Right. I have met her 2 aunts and 1 uncle, and then their mother passed away soon after we got together. So that's an interesting question. I don't remember seeing it on the aunts, but or the uncle, but I wasn't looking for it at that point. Yeah. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you. Thanks for that answer. That was very interesting.
Well, thanks for the question. It's neat to, it's great for me to have an understanding. And tonight I'll tell my husband how this works.
Yeah, because we don't talk, a lot of times we're talking about matching, but then I think a lot of times as genealogy, we don't necessarily get into the physical traits of it sometimes as much as we do the other. Okay. So our next question is from Lori, and she said, which DNA test is the best if 80% of your relatives are from Bohemia, Czech Republic, and Germany?
I would say, and this is based on working with families from Slovakia and Germany and other related areas. And I would say that it would be good to start out at Ancestry. Ancestry has the most people who've tested, so therefore you should have the highest number of matches. People also have trees, even though they're not perfect. It's a really, I always feel like I'd much rather start with trees and look at them to see if they're correct rather than just nothing,
Right.
no trees at all. So I would start out at Ancestry, and then I would transfer into Family Tree DNA and to MyHeritage. MyHeritage is a European-based company, so you might find more people living in the old world who are your matches. And both of those companies accept transfers. And so you would just download your DNA results from Ancestry and then upload them to those two other places. They have a small fee that's associated with that. It's free, but if you pay that small fee, you get all of the tools that you normally would get if you tested there. And I also always mention that Family Tree DNA, if you're a customer from the United States, they will automatically opt you in to law enforcement. The law enforcement can match their sample to you, but you can go into your settings and opt out of that if you don't want that to happen. That's not the case with MyHeritage or GEDmatch.
Yeah. So Diane said, but 90% of her matches don't have trees. I know. We actually, Mary came on and did a YouTube, Facebook Live with me recently, I guess a couple months ago, on building out trees for matches your DNA matches that do not have trees. So I'm going to pop that into the chat in just a moment so you can have reference to that. I actually went in and made a shorter version of it so you don't have to go through all the beginning part. So I'll pop that in there in just a second, Diane. So, well, thanks for that answer, Mary. I appreciate that. Okay, next up we have, okay. All right, we got a long one here, guys. In taking a DNA test, Kathy says, I found out my father's father, my grandfather, was not the person who I knew as who it was all my life. My father's mother was who I always thought all along. My DNA has extremely amount of common ancestors related to the grandmother's side, her parents. Some to my mother's side, found a half brother, your father's son, and a first cousin. One first cousin once removed at 341 centimeters from her grandmother's daughter's children. All right, Mary, did you follow all that? I have found no other common ancestors that are not attached to the trees I mentioned. What is the possibility that my grandmother's husband at that time was my grandfather and not an affair my grandmother might have had?
Okay. So I did take a look at this before we started, and I'm going to go back to the shared Centimorgan project tool because that's we've got some nice numbers.
Okay,
so
hang on one second. Let me switch out these two for you. All right,
okay,
make
so
it
we're
a
back
little bit bigger for you. There we go. Okay, you're ready.
Here. Okay, so she's got one match that is 666, and that gives us a 70% chance that it's a first cousin, and also a 30% chance that it's a half first cousin. And I focused on that one because if the grandfather isn't the grandfather expected, then that match would be a half first cousin. So, and there's also that the person that she said is a first cousin once removed, and that is 341. And I'm doing this to understand matches, and sometimes the company where you tested says this is your first cousin, and it might not be. It might not be your half niece, because first cousins and half nieces share the same amount of DNA, and they might be telling you something that's not true. So I wasn't 100% sure if the person knew it was their first cousin, or if that was what the company was saying. So just, to kind of get a better idea of what's going on here, let's look at that second person that is supposed to be a first cousin once removed. So 341 on the centimorgans. Okay, we've got a 65% chance that it's a first cousin once removed, but also a 33% chance that it's a half first cousin once removed. So if the grandfather is not correct, then this is there's a 33% chance that that this person's a half first cousin. Therefore, this match and the other match support both the grandfather being correct and the grandfather being not correct.
Okay.
So because because both of them show that possibility, but in both cases, being a full cousin is the greater chance. So here it's a 65% chance, and on the other one it was a 70% chance. I'm wondering if those two matches are a parent-child, so the child being the first cousin once removed, or if it's a parent and a niece or nephew.
Yeah, Kathy, I was going to say, Kathy, if you're either in Facebook chat or in YouTube chat, if you're here, if you want to chime in and let us know in the chat, that'd be great. I haven't seen her name pop up, but that doesn't mean I might not have missed it.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great if she's with us. So the reason I asked that is because we can combine those two probabilities if it's an aunt, uncle, and a niece, nephew. If it's a parent-child, then I can only look at the parent, because what the child got totally depends upon what the parent got. And when I say combine these two, that can be done in an Excel spreadsheet, or it can be done in another one of the DNA Painter tools called What Are the Odds, where we're drawing out a tree, and then we're putting in the matches and how many centimorgans are shared. And then that tool will say the most likely place that you fit into their tree. And that would shed some light on this question about, is your father's father biologically your father's father?
Right.
If it's two separate lines, just, looking at the math and doing a little bit of math in my head, if it's two separate lines, meaning it's an aunt, uncle, plus we call it a nibbling, which is a niece or nephew, then I would say there, the probabilities would come out that grandfather was a biological grandfather.
Okay.
So, and if it's a parent-child, then there's a 70% chance that the grandfather is the right person, and a 30% chance that he is not, because we only have that one person. We have to exclude the child.
Right.
So the second part of that question was talking about finding no other common ancestors that are not attached to the trees. And then what are the probabilities that the grandfather isn't the grandfather, which we've talked about. And I was wondering, when she said, I found out my father's father isn't my grandfather.
Mhm.
Is that just because there aren't matches showing up further back, like to his parents? So those would be her great grandparents, and those would be second or more distant cousins. If it's the great grandparents, it would be second cousins.
Mhm.
Or it could just be that nobody else has tested from that higher up generation, meaning the great grandparents. And let's see. So I was wondering if she had looked for other matches coming, so for example, that grandfather's mother likely has a unique surname.
Mhm.
So what I would do if I were looking at this is I would look for matches who have the grandfather's mother's maiden name in their tree.
Ah, yeah.
And that's one of the windows at the top of your match list at Ancestry.
Mhm.
And on the other companies, you can just search for that maiden name.
Yeah.
Because, so maybe, so if that's true, then if you find matches to his mother, then you know that she's biologically the great grandmother.
Mhm.
But it's still possible that she had a child with another man.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's why the matches aren't coming up with that surname.
Mhm.
So it's basically the overall message is to look, not just at the surname you expect. Like for me, I would be looking for Eberles.
Mhm.
And if not that many Eberles have tested, I might think, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Is my dad not my dad? Is my grandpa not my grandpa? And so on and so on.
Mhm.
But sometimes just people haven't tested from that line. So you really want to look more broadly at the wife, and then every generation back you've got two more surnames,
Mhm.
the father and the mother, and the father and the mother, that kind of thing. And before you conclude that somebody's not your biological ancestor.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense. They could just do what my family did, which was change the name. We don't know why.
True. That's a really good point.
There's
Right. Like
there's just always that crazy thing,
yep.
happens.
Change the name, anglicize the name.
Yeah.
A second marriage where the children assume the surname of the second husband, even though biologically he's not.
Oh yeah.
All
That
kinds of
happens.
things.
Yeah. All right. So our next question is from Ramona, and she said, "I'm trying to locate my third great grandfather and my great my and great great my third great great. All right. I think this is third great grandfather and grandmother. I read a notation on another tree. Rumor has it that they were both Choctaw Indians, and once they moved to Arkansas, began passing as white. I haven't had any paper trails on them. So what can I do now?"
Okay. Well, if you have done DNA testing, you might be able to find matches that go back to these third great grandparents. So they would be your fourth cousins, so sharing, a pretty small amount of DNA, and you would be looking for that surname in your matches trees, like we talked about it a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can be hard to substantiate a third great grandparent or to find one. It just depends upon how many people have tested, and if you get lucky and you can find some DNA matches to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I was thinking is, if this is, for example, your only ancestors who come from Arkansas, you can look at your match list and you can do two things. One is you can search for people born in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is that for sure, Ancestry and 23andMe and MyHeritage, you can search for where the person lives now. So where does your DNA match live now?
Mm-hmm.
And if your entire family isn't from Arkansas, then and you find a DNA match who is still living in Arkansas, and then you really focus in on that match and see, like, well, is this going to help me find those missing third great grandparents?
Right.
And I've had a couple of really nice successes in using that approach.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top of Ancestry, it's kind of small print, but it's at the very top. So it's whether you want to see your matches, the list, which is the default,
Right.
or right next to that is the map. So if you click on the map, and your matches have put down where they live, which not all of them do, that's how you find people. In this case, it would be people living in Arkansas. So you would find them, see if they have a tree, see who their shared matches are, because maybe they're shared matches that would substantiate that being from the right part of your family, or maybe it's going to lead to more matches who do have trees, that kind of thing. But it's like the fishing, the fishing trip where you're trying to pull out one, and then from there you use that one to try to get more.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. And you're right, that chain, being able to search on location, your matches by location, it's tiny. It's hard to find if you don't think to look for it. I don't think it's very obvious, but so thanks for that tip.
Sure.
People they probably want to try that out too.
All right. And one more thing. One more thing. I was just questioning whether any native DNA is showing up in the ethnicity estimates.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always show up,
right.
And different companies are better at showing native heritage than others, and it's not going to show up if people if there was intermarriages between white people and native peoples, even though the rumor says they were full-blooded this or that, a lot of times that's not the case, and then things get diluted out and all of a sudden you don't see it. So, but, and at the same time, there are a lot of families, in some places, virtually every family has a story about a native ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, one last thing is, there are people who specialize in Native American heritage. And if anyone wants to get referrals, I can refer them to a couple of people.
Yeah. Just let us know. You can either reach out to Mary or to me on the websites, and we can get you going in the right direction on that, because it is very much a specialty area when it comes to genealogy research. Okey-doke. Okay, it says, this is Shirley. She says, I only see reports of second cousin strength percentage of relationship. That is, like Justin Bourbonnais, 7.43%, Greg Carvel, 5.04%, John Carvel, 4.93%. Where are my first cousins? I know I still have 10 cousins that live in Ontario and Quebec. So it sounds like her first cousins are not showing up. She's only seeing those more distant cousins.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that first match, Justin, I looked to see 7.43%. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like that might be coming from 23andMe. I guess I will go back to the shared centimorgan project, because this brings up a good point, which is we can use those percents instead of the centimorgans.
All right.
Okay.
There it is. Okay. You're good to go.
Okay. So this is probably really tiny, but beneath the window where you would enter the shared centimorgans, it says, or enter percents. Okay. Mm-hmm. And here we would put in that 7.43. And if this person is in the audience, it would be great if you could say so in the chat, because I had a couple of questions. Okay, so now we've got 7.43%. Mm-hmm. For those of you who really like centimorgans, like me, it tells you how many centimorgans that corresponds to. And this, of course, is the most important thing we're looking at. And what I was looking for here was that the person said, "This is my second cousin." And what I noticed is that second cousin is only showing up as being about 1% of the time. When somebody shares this amount of DNA, 1% of the time they are second cousins. And 20% of the time they would be first cousins. So maybe this person is your first cousin that you think is not showing up, but I don't know. Maybe you know exactly who this person is. So there's also the greatest chance at 78% is that they are a half first cousin or a first cousin once removed. So this might be one of your first cousins. Those other two matches are roughly 5%. So if we look at 5% and then go down, there would be a 21% chance that they are a second cousin. But there's a 78% chance that they are a first cousin once removed. So for example, the child of your first cousin, or a half first cousin where you only share one of the two grandparents. So, so just in thinking about what these matches who've come up, they look like they potentially could be closer. So that first person may be a first cousin, and the other two could be first cousin once removed. I'm going to go back. So I was wondering if you know if any of your first cousins have tested, or it almost sounds like just the person's wondering, well, how come only second cousins are showing up, or more distant cousins? And if that's the case, I would say that is normally what happens, because we have more second cousins than we have first cousins. We have more third cousins than we have second cousins. As you go further and further back, you have more of that kind of cousin. So it's not unusual. I also wanted to mention that even if two people who are third cousins test at the same company, there's not a 100% chance that they are going to match. There's a website that is isogg.org that has a table that shows you the probability that two cousins will match. Okay. And if you're second cousin or closer, there's 100% chance that you'll match. Mm-hmm. So, if you ask your first cousin to test, and you're already at that company, they will be in your match list. And if they're not, then something's not right? Like, yeah. Even if you're a half first cousin, and your grandfathers aren't the same, they'll be in your match list. Mm-hmm. But if they're not in your match list, and and sometimes it takes a few days to get all the matches in, but basically, there's some non-biological parentage issue that's happening.
Yes. Oh, yep. We're making our way through. Okay, so the next one was from Katie. She said, is it possible she could have no DNA matches with a paternal great-grandfather? For my DNA matches on Ancestry and MyHeritage, I only appear to have matches with my paternal great-grandmother.
That is definitely possible. It depends upon, where the heritage of the people, mm-hmm. that in that database is all of the databases are predominantly people of Western European descent. So if one of your great-grandparents is something else, then there's a chance that you're not going to find matches to that great-grandparent. Mm-hmm. And even Eastern European can be enough to throw you off and not find matches to that great-grandparent.
Yeah. That's interesting.
You know,
I didn't. Yeah.
and then you've got people of African descent, people of Asian descent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, their representation in the databases is far lower than that of Western Europeans.
Right. Right. Okay. Our next question is from Lawrence. He said, "Can I determine who is maternal or paternal cousin matches through DNA and chromosomes?"
This is a great question. It's very timely.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought about doing like a whole presentation just on this subject. And maybe next month we can.
All right, next month, right?
Next month. So Ancestry just released, at least to some users, and so far everyone I've looked at has it. It's called DNA Matches by Parent.
Hmm.
And it's a new feature. We previously talked about where they're breaking down at Ancestry your ethnicity estimate by parent. And if your parents haven't tested there, they will put it as parent 1 and parent 2. And for a lot of people, you can go in and say, oh, I know parent 1 is my mom and parent 2 is my dad. And then you can edit that label into, maternal, paternal. Okay. So that came out. And like I said, we talked about that a month or two ago, I think maybe 2 months ago. And so if you'd like to go back and look at that video, that's on Lisa's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And then just last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, they came out with this new feature, this DNA Matches by Parent. And if you haven't updated the labels from parent 1, parent 2 to maternal, paternal, now you can look at your matches either attributable to parent 1 or parent 2. And with this feature, they tell you the surnames, the top surnames that are in parent 1 and parent 2's matches, because they've looked at the trees of those matches. And that might, if you can't differentiate your parents based on your ethnicities, like I think maybe Lisa, is that your case where they're pretty similar?
Yes. My parents, the heritage is so similar on both sides. I think I know, but I can't say for 100% sure that I know.
Well, so this would be nice for you to look at, because it'll say like, I found Talbot, I found, this, I found that in parent 1, let's say, and you can say, oh my gosh, that must be my dad. So now you can edit it to be paternal. And now your match list will be broken down into paternal and maternal. There's a third category, which is like the uncharacterized.
Okay.
Either they can't figure it out, or maybe it's in both, that kind of thing. So it's a really cool feature. I've been playing around with it this week for one of my clients, and for myself too, because I thought that was a fun thing to do. And and Blaine Bettinger had a survey in one of his Facebook groups, probably something like genetic genealogy tools and techniques. And he was saying, hey, this is out. It's a beta tool. Do you have it? And is it accurate? And are you in the United States? So I think, maybe it's probably most accurate for people in the United States, because we have, that's who's in the database. But anyway, it's cool. It's cool, and great question. Thank you.
Oh, good to know. Yeah. I want to go try it. I just haven't had a chance this week to actually really dig into that one, but that is, oops, hang on. Guys, if you notice, I'm actually in a different setup today, so I'm a little rusty on my clicking skills here. All right. So Lawrence also asked, how can 3 siblings take the same DNA test to improve? How can having 3 siblings take the same DNA test improve the research outcomes?
That is a good question. One thing is, as I talked about earlier, once you get to that third cousin matching level, then not all third cousins are going to match. So that means that let's just say there's a 90% chance that you'll match your third cousin.
Okay.
The 10% of your third cousins are not going to be in your match list. But if you have a second sibling test, they're going to have a different set of those 90%.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the person shows up in their match list.
Okay.
And then if you have a third sibling test, well, they're going to have, their 90% too. And through those three siblings, you're going to see a fuller picture of those matches. And if your research is for your second great grandparent or further back, that's where those third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and so on come in. So that's where it's really nice to have multiple siblings, maybe cousins, first cousins, and so on, because you're just going to be retrieving different matches. And the matches will overlap, of course, but you have more power because they're going to have those slightly different matches. And secondly, you're going to also have probably slightly different ethnicity estimates.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something, that really interests you shows up in your brother's ethnicity estimate and not in yours. So you might have thought like, oh, geez, I thought I was part Norwegian, but I'm not, but it shows up in your brother's. So there's that also.
Great answer. Yeah, definitely. Carol said, I have a first cousin that is showing up as having DNA from both sides of my family instead of a paternal or maternal side, which is what I would expect. I know he is the paternal side, so what should I look for to see why the maternal side is showing up?
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if this was at Ancestry with that new feature that we just talked about, because some people are in that uncategorized category. But I would say you can look at that person's tree to see if you can recognize some of those maternal surnames that are overlapping. And if it's at Ancestry and they're able to do common ancestors. So if you click on matches who have common ancestors, then the left-hand side of the match page, and it'll show you the ways you're related to that person. So it might show you the paternal way you're related. And then if they know how you're related through your mother's line, it'll say additional possible common ancestors. And then you click on that and then they show it to you. So that, if Ancestry is able to do that, then you can, you can take advantage of that function where they're saying, well, this is what we think, because, our computer has analyzed it and, saved you the time of doing the initial legwork. But otherwise, I would just look at the tree. I would look at the shared matches. And I have some matches like that where they're matching both my paternal aunt and they're matching some of my maternal cousins. And
I have that too.
Yeah.
And I actually was able to figure out, but then again, my guys didn't go that far. So it actually makes sense given if you look at locations and just what the family did in general.
Mm-hmm. Right. If the maternal and the paternal family were in the same area for any length of time, there's chances are you're some third cousin from one side of your family married some third cousin from the other side of the family. And like, you didn't even know who these third cousins were, but now all of a sudden their child shows up in your match list and you're like, whoa, they're related to me two ways.
And then you have really fun family get-togethers. All right, nice. Okay, let's see, guys. I think we're getting toward the end, but we had a lot of questions this time. So in family tree DNA, Leah wants to know. She says, I have 35 of 37 markers with someone, and 65 of 67, and 107 of 111 markers, which also match surnames. But we can't seem to find our family connection. Last generation we could find was the paternal side at 1787.
Yep. Okay. Well, this is a very common question, and it's, these projects are really difficult. Family tree DNA, when you do these tests, they've got a button I think now it's a little button that's got 3 bars on it,
Mhm.
and it's called the tip calculator. And if you click on it, so there's this button is for every match on the far right side. And if you click on it, it will say the likelihood that you'll find a common ancestor within so many generations. And that gives you a good idea of how far back your trees need to go. And the person did say that her tree or his tree goes back to 1787. And I don't know how many generations that is. But what I was thinking is that if the match, and I assume this is the same match,
Mhm.
who matches at different levels, if their tree goes back further in time, I would look to see if they have built it forward in time from, let's say their oldest known ancestor was born in 1700.
Mhm.
Okay. And this person's tree is stuck in the late 1700s. So if the other person, the match, has built their tree forward, or if you can replicate it and do that yourself, that might help you figure out where those two trees intersect.
Okay. Mhm.
The other thing I want to suggest is there is also the Big Y DNA
Mhm.
test, and it's expensive, but I've recently become a big fan of it because in this case, if the two of you did the Big Y test, and it does go on sale occasionally,
Mhm.
so if you both did it, that looks at so many more DNA markers that they're able to much more definitively say to you how close in terms of generations the two of you are related. So I'll just try to keep it brief, but I have a project I was working on recently where in the 111 test, I thought that one match was closer than the other based on
Mhm.
the tip calculator, and based on my hopes, because this person had a much better they had a much better idea of where in Ireland the people came from.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, this is great, the top 111 guy. Let's really focus on him. But when the three of them, so the client and the two closest 111 matches, when they did the Big Y, it totally flipped. And that it's on the Big Y, which is much more definitive. It said, well, actually, the client is related to the other guy. So
Ah.
not the guy that had the obituary saying these people come from Roscommon, Ireland. The other guy who,
We don't know
his
where he
tree
came
ends
from.
in the United States. And I think they probably all come from the same county and parish or
Mhm.
so. But and then also we found we found autosomal DNA matches who had the surname. It wasn't their father's name,
Mhm.
but the surname was in the tree, and she listed the exact place in Ireland that they came
Ah.
from. So now I can combine that Y DNA information with the autosomal DNA information. And with Ireland, they've got the parish books transcribed but not indexed. So now my client can go and much more specifically look, at those parish records
Mhm.
for people with a surname to see if she can nail it.
Got it. So it looks like the questioner Terry is in the audience. She was saying this is from her brother's Y DNA. So
Okay.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
their father's father. Yep. So I hope. Okay. Oh, and I was going to say, Lisa, I'm not sure. I had two other questions from the
I did
beginning of the.
too. Did I
Oh,
skip,
okay.
did I skip something?
Um,
Go ahead and ask them because I may not
sure.
have. I was trying to get. I will be honest. People have been asked. I actually just popped over, and there are extra questions already still in the chat, or in the
Oh,
on the form. So
on the spreadsheet.
hopefully,
Okay.
oh yeah, we
Sure.
have more
Okay.
now.
So it's funny. I think this question has been asked before, but it's
Mhm.
good to go over it again. So the question, and I printed all these out, so I'm just looking down at my printout. feel like giving up, have a 335 centimorgan match. I know it's on my mystery branch that I think is a family secret back to my grandfather, and have worked with the DNA guide and still haven't figured it out. Help. So the DNA guide is Diane Southard, whom I mentioned before about having that excellent book. And she is amazing. She's a great teacher. So here are my thoughts. So 335 centimorgans. As you probably all can guess, I put that into the shared centimorgan project tool. And that said that the highest probability, which was 62%, was that this person is a half first cousin. Okay. And what that means to me is that it looks like you're right. You know, this supports you being right that this mystery great grandfather could be coming from this half first cousin match, because a half first cousin shares one grandparent, and I assume this is not from your grandmother. So I would look at this match, you know, who may or may not have a tree. And like Lisa mentioned, we did that presentation on building trees for your matches, which is always nice when that works out. And I would look at their shared matches, and what you're looking for is, you know, who's their shared ancestor, who's their most recent common ancestor. You know, looking at their trees, looking at their ethnicities. You know, this is that's a pretty close match, a half first cousin. So hopefully there are like some second cousins and some third cousins, and you can figure out what is the glue that's holding them together. You know, what biological line is holding them together. So I think this is a great start for that mystery.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Did you have one more question, or?
Yeah, it's another.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Another one, and I hope the person's in the audience. It was question number 2 on the spreadsheet. I didn't copy the names. I just copied the questions. So and maybe this is, well, no, it's not the same person, but it's another Y-DNA question.
Oh, yeah.
So my brother did a Y37 test at Family Tree DNA. The matches all have a different surname out of 12. So I think that means maybe they looked at the 12 marker level and everybody had a different surname.
Oh.
And 8 have the same surname. So I'm not quite sure if that means at the 37 level marker, 8 people had the same surname, or it's just not clear to me. How do I figure it out? And you know, so in thinking, so it sounds like the goal is, but I could be wrong, figuring out their father's like real surname is how people put it to me. And one thing I definitely would recommend is upgrading at least to the 111 level. You know, if you've got just a ton of matches, and because Y37, it just isn't that specific. Like you could be related to the people hundreds of years ago, and or 500 years ago, and you're just not going to be able to figure out how you connect, or even a lot of times you can't even figure out a surname. And doing a 111 test, you're going to be looking at a smaller group of people, but you're going to be looking at a lot more places on the Y chromosome, and that will give you a more specific list. And if you're still having questions, then I would go to the big Y, or maybe jump to that right away.
Yeah, I see. Good answer. So I have one more question, and I wanted to ask this because I saw Alicia in the chat, and so she said she wanted to know how she could find a family member born in the 1800s. Listen, she asked also how to find a photo of a family member born in the 1800s. So Alicia, was there any DNA part of this piece of it, or was it strictly just kind of how to find that person born in the 1800s? When it comes to finding photographs, I have got blog posts and that I can share with you in the chat. I think I have some videos for that as well, but I was going to try to stick to DNA as much as we could for this particular chat, but we will address that. I'll reach back out to you and kind of answer that for you a little bit.
Yeah, right. And also, if you did do DNA, one really nice thing is that oftentimes people will upload photographs, these old family photographs, either of individuals or marriages or family groups. And you can oftentimes find photographs that you have never seen, or maybe you saw them when you were a kid and you actually recognize the photograph, but somebody else had a copy and they uploaded it.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you can put it in your gallery of your, for your ancestor.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to find it as well. All right, guys. So we are a little bit past 4 o'clock now, at least Eastern time. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you, Mary, for answering all of these questions. This was a lot of questions. I'm glad you guys did this. And I hope you guys learned a lot. I know I always pick up wonderful tips and tricks from Mary when it comes to DNA and just how to look at the problem a little differently. That's sometimes I get stuck in one line of thinking. So thank you so much for joining us. Watch the emails for the next one that comes up. If you haven't, I would love it if you are if you're watching on the YouTube channel, if you'd love to subscribe to the YouTube channel, I would love it. That lets me know, one, that you're interested in the topics that we share. It also lets us know that if you subscribe or hit the like button, it lets me know that you'd like to see more of Mary on the YouTube channel here live. And we will do that. So thank you so much for coming. You guys have a fantastic day or evening, depending on where you're at. And we'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.